The unusual bet. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with murmurs as the newest species to join the Council made their debut. The humans, small in stature compared to the towering Xerathans and the multi-limbed Kilvith, stood at the center of attention. Ambassador Nolan, representing Earth, maintained a calm demeanor, his sharp eyes observing every alien face that regarded him with skepticism. "They look fragile," muttered a Kilvith delegate, his words amplified through his translator. His mandibles clicked in amusement. What could such a species possibly offer to the Council? The Council chamber erupted in polite laughter. Humans had been the subject of many whispers since their sudden leap into interstellar politics. Despite being newcomers to spacefaring, they had advanced rapidly, defying conventional expectations. Ambassador Nolan allowed a small smile to grace his face. "Fragile, perhaps, but adaptability and determination have served us well so far." The Xerathan delegate, a towering being with a crystalline body that shimmered under the chamber lights, leaned forward. "Adaptability is one thing, Ambassador, but this Council values proven competence. Your species has yet to demonstrate that you can contribute meaningfully to galactic progress." Nolan tilted his head, pretending to consider the comment. Then, with a deliberate pause, he said, "Perhaps we should change that perception. Why don't we solve one of your unsolvable problems?" The murmurs in the hall turned into a low roar of disbelief. Delegates exchanged incredulous glances. The Xerathan delegate's crystalline form pulsed faintly, indicating amusement. "An unsolvable problem," he echoed. "Do you have any idea what you're proposing, human?" Nolan met the alien's gaze without flinching. "We humans thrive on challenges. Name the task, and we'll prove ourselves." A moment of silence followed, broken only by the faint hum of the chamber's energy field. Finally, a Gorthek delegate, whose species was renowned for their mining expertise, spoke. "The Red Nebula," he rumbled. "Its collapsing star threatens the systems around it. None of our technology has succeeded in stabilizing it." The Council nodded in agreement. The Red Nebula had been a thorn in the side of interstellar travelers for centuries. Its volatile energy made travel through nearby systems nearly impossible, and all attempts to address it had ended in failure. Ambassador Nolan glanced at his aides, who looked both alarmed and intrigued. Then, with a confident smile, he replied, "Consider it done." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some delegates laughed openly, while others shouted protests. "Arrogance," one delegate spat. "The humans will only make things worse." The Xerathan delegate raised a hand, silencing the room. "Very well," he said, his crystalline body glowing faintly. "We shall grant you this opportunity. But be warned, failure will not go unnoticed." Nolan nodded respectfully. "Understood." As the meeting adjourned, Nolan and his team made their way to their ship. One of his aides, a young engineer named Sarah, leaned close and whispered, "Ambassador, are we really doing this? Stabilizing a collapsing star is, well, it's impossible." "Impossible for them," Nolan replied, his voice calm. "But we're not them." Back in the Council chamber, the alien delegates continued to discuss the humans' bold claim. The Kilvith delegate clicked his mandibles again. If they fail, it will only confirm their incompetence. The Xerathan delegate, however, remained silent, his crystalline body pulsing faintly. Deep down, he couldn't shake a feeling of unease. The humans had a reputation for defying odds, and he couldn't help but wonder, what if they succeeded? On board the human ship, Nolan addressed his team. "We've been underestimated since the day we first ventured into space. This is our chance to change the narrative. Let's show them what humanity can do." The ship roared to life, leaving the Council station behind. As it entered hyperspace, Nolan stared out the viewport, a determined look on his face. The challenge ahead was daunting, but he knew one thing for certain. Humans had a knack for turning the impossible into reality. And this time, the galaxy was watching. Into the Red Nebula. The human ship, Dauntless, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Red Nebula. The swirling clouds of crimson energy stretched across the void, an ominous and mesmerizing display of power. Flashes of light burst from the collapsing star at its heart, casting eerie shadows on the ship's hull. Inside the control room, the atmosphere was tense. Ambassador Nolan stood behind the command console, his gaze fixed on the nebula. Beside him, Sarah, the ship's chief engineer, was running diagnostics. The crew worked in hushed concentration, their movements precise and deliberate. "Initial readings?" Nolan asked. Sarah's fingers danced over the console. "Massive gravitational distortions. Radiation levels are off the charts. No wonder no one's been able to stabilize it." She glanced at him, her voice dropping. "This is beyond anything we've dealt with." Nolan didn't waver. "Good thing we don't scare easily." From the back of the room, Dr. Elara Trent, the ship's astrophysicist, approached, holding a tablet filled with data. Her face was pale but determined. "The star's core is collapsing faster than predicted. We're looking at a full implosion within 72 hours. If we're going to do this, we need a plan, and fast." Sarah nodded. "I've been working on one. If we can deploy a series of gravitational stabilizers around the core, we might be able to buy ourselves time. But placing them will be tricky, to say the least." Nolan turned to the crew. "We've never been afraid of tricky. We're here to prove what humanity is capable of. Let's get to work." The crew sprang into action, preparing the stabilizers and running simulations. The Dauntless moved cautiously into the nebula, its shield straining against the intense radiation. As they drew closer to the collapsing star, the ship's lights flickered, and alarms blared. "Shields at 80%, reported Lieutenant Harris, the navigator. "If we get any closer, we'll be pushing our limits." "We don't have a choice," Nolan said firmly. "Keep us steady." Suddenly, a transmission crackled through the comms. "Unidentified vessel. This is the Gorthek mining ship Thalner. What are you doing here?" Nolan activated the comms. "This is Ambassador Nolan of Earth. We're here to stabilize the collapsing star." A moment of silence followed. Then laughter erupted over the line. "You? A Deathworlder ship? Stabilizing this star? You've got guts, I'll give you that. But you're going to get yourselves killed." Sarah leaned toward Nolan, whispering, "They're not wrong. The Gorthek are experts in stellar phenomena. If they can't do it." Nolan raised a hand, silencing her. He addressed the Gorthek captain. "You're welcome to observe or assist. Either way, we're not leaving until this star is stabilized." The Gorthek captain snorted. "Good luck, human. You'll need it." The Dauntless pressed on, leaving the mining ship behind. Inside the control room, the tension was palpable. Sarah and her team worked feverishly to modify the stabilizers for deployment, while Dr. Trent monitored the star's activity. "The core's instability is increasing," Trent reported. "We'll need to place the first stabilizer within the next hour, or the chain reaction will be irreversible." "Then we'd better get moving," Nolan said. As the Dauntless reached the first deployment zone, Sarah and a team of engineers suited up for a high-risk mission. The stabilizer was too large to deploy remotely, so it had to be placed manually. "Are you sure about this?" Nolan asked as Sarah prepared to leave the airlock. She gave him a tight smile. "If I wasn't, I wouldn't be here." Moments later, Sarah and her team stepped into the void, tethered to the ship by slim cables. The stabilizer floated beside them, a massive device glowing faintly with energy. The radiation was intense, and every step was a struggle. Sarah's voice crackled over the comms. "Almost there, just a little further." Inside the ship, Nolan and the crew watched anxiously. The nebula's turbulence battered the Dauntless, and the stabilizer team was exposed to the full force of its wrath. "Stabilizer in position," Sarah finally reported. Her voice was strained but triumphant. "Activating now." A hum filled the comms as the stabilizer came to life. The surrounding space seemed to settle slightly. the chaotic energy dimming. "One down," Nolan said, his voice steady. "3 to go." But just as relief began to set in, alarms blared. "Radiation spike," Trent shouted. "The star's core is reacting to the stabilizer. It's destabilizing faster." Nolan's jaw tightened. "Get back to the ship. Now." Sarah and her team scrambled toward the airlock as the nebula's turbulence intensified. The Dauntless shook violently, its shields flickering under the strain. Inside the ship, the crew worked frantically to adjust the stabilizer's parameters. "If we can't balance the energy output, the entire system will collapse," Sarah said as she re-entered the control room, still in her suit. "We'll balance it," Nolan said. "Failure isn't an option." Outside, the nebula raged on, a crimson storm against the vast darkness of space. The humans were outmatched, outnumbered, and outgunned, but they weren't out of hope. And in the face of the galaxy's disbelief, they pressed on, determined to prove that sometimes the impossible was just another problem waiting for a human solution. The galactic doubt. The Dauntless steadied itself in the chaotic expanse of the red nebula. The first stabilizer had bought them some time, but the collapsing star still loomed, growing more unstable with each passing moment. The crew's efforts were valiant, but whispers of doubt began to creep in. Ambassador Nolan stared at the star through the observation window, the fiery mass swirling with menacing beauty. Behind him, the control room buzzed with activity. Every console flickered with warnings, and the air was thick with tension. Dr. Ilara Trent approached him, her expression grim. "The stabilizer's effects are temporary at best. If we don't place the next one within the hour, it won't matter. The entire nebula will collapse, and with it, any chance of success." "We'll place it," Nolan said firmly. His voice carried the conviction of someone who didn't entertain failure. But the skepticism wasn't confined to the Dauntless. Another transmission crackled through the comms, this time from the Gorthek mining ship. "Human vessel, this is Captain Vrek of the Founder. We've been monitoring your progress, and I have to say, it's amusing," the voice drawled, thick with condescension. Nolan activated the comms. "Captain Vrek, if you've got any useful input, now would be the time to share it." Vrek chuckled. "Oh, I'm just here for the show. Watching a Death Worlder attempt to tame a collapsing star. That's entertainment you can't buy. But let me offer you some advice. Run while you still can." The Dauntless crew exchanged uneasy glances. Nolan, however, didn't flinch. "We're not leaving, Captain. If we can stabilize this star, it'll be a game-changer for every species in the galaxy." Vrek's laughter was cold. "And if you fail? Your ship, your crew, obliterated. That's the likely outcome." Nolan cut the transmission and turned back to his crew. "Let them doubt us. It won't be the first time we've done the impossible." Sarah, who had been working tirelessly on the stabilizers, glanced up. "The Gorthak are experts in mining and stellar phenomena, right? If they're so confident we'll fail, maybe they know something we don't." Dr. Trent nodded. "They've likely attempted something similar and failed. If we could get access to their data." A spark of an idea lit Nolan's eyes. "Lieutenant Harris, open a private channel to the Founder. Let's see how much they value their pride." Moments later, the Gorthek captain appeared on the screen. His reptilian features were smug, his scales glinting under the dim light of his ship. "Back so soon, Ambassador. Ready to admit defeat?" "Not quite," Nolan replied. "But I'm curious. You've been in this nebula for weeks, haven't you? That means you've collected data we could use." Vrek leaned back, his forked tongue flickering. "And why would I share it with you? Because if we succeed, it'll prove what the Gorthek couldn't do alone. Imagine the prestige of being the species that first encountered humanity's brilliance." The Gorthek captain narrowed his eyes, his pride visibly grappling with the logic. "And if you fail? Then you get the satisfaction of saying you were right. Either way, you win." A tense silence followed. Then, with a reluctant hiss, Vrek gestured to someone off-screen. Fine. I'll transmit the data, but don't expect it to save you. The data arrived moments later, and the crew quickly analyzed it. Sarah's eyes widened as she scanned the readings. They tried deploying stabilizers too, but they underestimated the star's rotational velocity. That's why their attempts failed. Dr. Trent's fingers flew across her tablet. If we adjust the stabilizer's angular momentum compensators, we might be able to counteract the rotation. It's a long shot, Sarah said, but it's better than nothing. Then let's make it work, Nolan said. Prepare the next stabilizer. As the Dauntless approached the second deployment zone, the nebula's turbulence grew fiercer. The ship groaned under the strain, and the crew fought to maintain control. This is as close as we can get, Harris reported. Any further, and the shields will collapse. Sarah and her team suited up again, their determination outweighing their fear. The stabilizer floated beside them, its adjustments complete. Be careful out there, Nolan said as they entered the airlock. We always are, Sarah replied with a smirk, though her eyes betrayed her nerves. As the team moved into the void, the nebula's chaos surrounded them. Every step was a battle, but they pressed on, guided by humanity's unyielding spirit. Inside the ship, Nolan watched their progress with bated breath. The galaxy might doubt them, but he knew better. Humans thrived in the face of adversity, and this was no different. And so, amidst the skepticism of the galaxy, the crew of the Dauntless pushed forward, determined to show that when humanity sets its sights on the stars, nothing can stand in their way. The human gambit. The Dauntless hovered precariously near the heart of the nebula, its shields glowing under the relentless barrage of stellar radiation. Inside the ship, the tension was palpable. Every crew member knew that their next move could determine not only their survival, but also the fate of the entire galaxy's perception of humanity. Ambassador Nolan stood at the center of the command deck, his gaze fixed on the holographic display of the nebula. The star's unstable rotation threatened to tear apart the fabric of the surrounding space. They had one stabilizer successfully deployed, but the task was far from complete. Lieutenant Harris broke the silence. Sir, the second stabilizer team is in position. They're awaiting final calibration. Nolan nodded. Dr. Trent, are the new adjustments ready? Dr. Ilara Trent looked up from her console, her face a mixture of determination and exhaustion. Yes, but it's a gamble. If the calculations are even slightly off, the stabilizer could destabilize the entire structure. Nolan allowed himself a faint smile. Gambles are what humans do best, Doctor. Let's proceed. On the outer hull of the Dauntless, Sarah and her team wrestled with the second stabilizer. The swirling currents of the nebula made every movement treacherous. The stabilizer's weight and the unpredictable gravitational fluxes made the task feel like an uphill battle. Hold it steady, Sarah shouted over the comms as another violent shake rocked the ship. Her team braced themselves against the stabilizer, their suits' magnetic grips struggling to hold. Back on the ship, Harris monitored their progress. They're almost there, but the nebula's gravitational pull is increasing. If they don't deploy it soon, they will, Nolan interrupted, his voice firm. They have to. Suddenly, the comms crackled, and Captain Vrek's voice sneered through the static. Humans, your stubbornness is entertaining, but it's also suicidal. Do you truly believe you can tame what the Gorthak could not? Nolan activated the transmission, his tone as calm as ever. Captain Vrek, we don't measure success by the failures of others. We set our sights higher. Vrek hissed in amusement. Higher indeed. But when you fall, the galaxy will hear the sound of your arrogance shattering. Nolan smirked as he cut the transmission. Let them watch. Out on the hull, Sarah finally managed to lock the stabilizer into position. It's secure. Beginning calibration now, she reported. The stabilizer hummed to life, its mechanism spinning rapidly as it adjusted to the star's violent rotation. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might succeed. But then, An unexpected surge in the nebula's gravity field threw everything into chaos. Stabilizer output is fluctuating, Dr. Trent shouted. It's trying to compensate, but it's not enough. Sarah, what's happening out there? Nolan demanded. Sarah's voice came through, strained but determined. The gravitational pull is stronger than we calculated. We need more time to recalibrate. You don't have time, Harris said. The nebula's core is destabilizing faster than anticipated. Nolan clenched his fists. We're not giving up. Is there any way to buy them the time they need? Dr. Trent hesitated, then spoke. If we divert power from the shields to amplify the stabilizer's output, it might work, but it'll leave us vulnerable to the nebula's radiation. It's a risk we'll take, Nolan said without hesitation. Do it. The command deck buzzed with activity as the crew redirected power. The shields dimmed and alarms blared, but the stabilizer's output increased. Outside, Sarah felt the change immediately. The stabilizer steadied itself, and she quickly completed the recalibration. It's working. Stabilizer is online and synchronized with the first one. A cheer erupted on the command deck, but it was short-lived. Dr. Trent's console lit up with new warnings. The nebula's core is still unstable. We need the third stabilizer in place within the next 30 minutes, or everything we've done so far will be for nothing. Nolan turned to the crew. Then let's not waste a second. Prepare for the next deployment. As the Dauntless powered up for its next move, the galaxy watched in silence. The Gorthak sneered, the Galactic Council observed with bated breath, and countless species across the stars tuned in, unable to look away. For the humans aboard the Dauntless, failure was not an option. They had come too far, risked too much, and defied too many odds to turn back now. And so, with determination burning brighter than the collapsing star before them, they prepared to make their next gamble. Because when humans decided to prove a point, the galaxy had no choice but to watch and learn. A galaxy holds its breath. The Dauntless glided closer to the heart of the raging nebula. The remaining stabilizer, critical for success, lay in the ship's cargo bay, ready to be deployed. The stakes had never been higher, and the weight of every decision bore heavily on Ambassador Nolan and his crew. On the bridge, the holographic display showed the synchronized output of the two deployed stabilizers. They were holding, but just barely. The nebula's core pulsed erratically, its unstable energies threatening to tear the entire region apart. Dr. Ilara Trent tapped furiously on her console, her voice tight. The core is oscillating faster than expected. The final stabilizer needs to be perfectly aligned, or it won't compensate for the energy imbalance. Lieutenant Harris turned to Nolan. Sir, we've received another transmission from Captain Vrek. Should I patch it through? Nolan nodded. Let's hear what our skeptic has to say. The transmission crackled to life, and Vrek's condescending tone filled the bridge. Humans, your persistence is admirable, if misguided. Do you not see the futility of this? You toy with forces far beyond your understanding. Nolan's calm reply carried an edge of defiance. Captain Vrek, humanity's history is built on overcoming the impossible. This is no different. Vrek sneered. Then allow me to issue a challenge. If you truly believe in your plan, let us see if your fragile stabilizers can endure what's to come. Before Nolan could respond, the Gorthak ship fired a concentrated energy pulse into the nebula. The already chaotic core reacted violently, sending shockwaves through the region. The Dauntless rocked as the shockwave hit. On the hull, Sarah and her team, preparing the final stabilizer for deployment, struggled to maintain their footing. What the hell was that? Sarah shouted over the comms. Harris's voice came through, tense but steady. The Gorthak are trying to force the core into collapse. They're testing us. Well, they're about to get their answer, Sarah muttered, her grip tightening on the stabilizer's casing. Inside the ship, Nolan turned to Dr. Trent. Can we still stabilize the core after that? Trent hesitated, then nodded. It'll be harder, but it's possible. The stabilizer's positioning will need to be flawless. Nolan's expression hardened. Sarah, no room for error on this one. Get it done. Copy that, Sarah replied. The Dauntless maneuvered into position, its hull groaning under the pressure of the nebula's fluctuating gravity. Sarah and her team worked quickly, anchoring the stabilizer to the ship's exterior. As they activated the device, it hummed to life, sensing with the two already deployed. For a moment, everything seemed to stabilize. The nebula's core pulsed more steadily, its energy output leveling off. But the relief was short-lived. "Sir, we've got a problem," Harris reported. "The core's energy is destabilizing again. It's adapting to the stabilizers." Dr. Trent's eyes widened. "It's like the core is fighting back. The stabilizers can't keep up with the fluctuations." Nolan clenched his jaw. "Options." Trent hesitated. "We could boost the stabilizer's output, but it would require pulling power from the ship's engines. If we do that, we won't have enough energy to escape." The room fell silent. The crew looked to Nolan, waiting for his decision. Finally, he spoke. "Do it. Humanity didn't come this far to fail now." Trent and Harris immediately set to work rerouting power. The lights on the ship flickered, and alarms blared as the stabilizers surged with energy. Outside, Sarah watched as the stabilizers glowed brighter, their output increasing exponentially. The nebula's core began to stabilize once more, its violent pulses subsiding into a steady rhythm. But the strain on the ship was immense. The Dauntless shuddered under the pressure, its systems pushed to their limits. Inside, Nolan addressed the crew. "We're not out of this yet. Prepare for the next phase. Whatever the Gorthak throw at us, we'll be ready." As the ship held its position against the odds, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. For the humans aboard the Dauntless, this was more than a mission. It was a statement. Because when humans decided to prove a point, even the cosmos had to take notice. The Gorthak's last gambit. The bridge of the Dauntless was a whirlwind of activity as alarms blared and data scrolled across every screen. The stabilizers were holding, for now, but the strain was immense. Outside, the nebula glowed with an eerie, pulsating light, its energy shifting unpredictably, as if testing the humans' resolve. Captain Vreck's image once again appeared on the main screen, his expression smug. "Humans, you continue to defy logic. Do you not see? Even if you succeed, you're only delaying the inevitable." Ambassador Nolan's voice was cold and steady. "If inevitable means giving up, then humanity rewrote that definition a long time ago. What's your next move, Vreck? Or are you all talk?" The Gorthak captain's smirk faded, replaced by a calculating glare. "You've forced my hand, human. Observe what true power looks like." The transmission cut off abruptly, and moments later, the Gorthak ship's massive cannons powered up. Bright energy beams lanced toward the nebula's core, deliberately targeting the stabilizer's synchronized fields. "Impact in 10 seconds. Harris shouted, his fingers flying across his console. "They're trying to overload the stabilizers by disrupting their harmony." Nolan snapped into action. "All hands, brace for impact. Dr. Trent, can we adjust the stabilizers in time?" Dr. Trent's hands trembled as she worked the controls. "I can recalibrate their frequencies, but it'll take time. We'll need to hold them off." "Understood," Nolan said. "Harris, deploy the defense drones. Keep those beams off the stabilizers at all costs." Small, sleek drones launched from the Dauntless, forming a protective barrier around the stabilizers. Their automated targeting systems intercepted the incoming energy beams, creating dazzling explosions in the void. On the outer hull, Sarah and her team scrambled to reinforce the stabilizer's connections. The ship vibrated violently with every near miss, the nebula's chaotic energy adding to the danger. "Sarah," Nolan's voice crackled over the comms. "How's it looking out there?" "We're holding. Barely," Sarah replied, her voice strained. "But if those beams keep coming, something's going to give." Inside, Dr. Trent's recalibration was nearing completion. Sweat beaded on her brow as she adjusted the stabilizer's harmonics, matching them to the shifting energy of the nebula. Finally, she called out, "Recalibration complete. Stabilizers are sensing again." The nebula's core pulsed more evenly as the stabilizers resumed their work, but the Gorthak weren't finished. Their ship began to charge a massive energy weapon, its ominous glow signaling a devastating attack. "Sir," Harris reported, "if that weapon fires, it'll destroy the stabilizers and destabilize the entire nebula. We need to act fast." Nolan's mind raced. Options. Harris hesitated. "We could overload the stabilizers ourselves, forcing the nebula's core into a controlled collapse. It's risky, but it might neutralize the energy before the Gorthak can act." Dr. Trent nodded. "It's a gamble, but it could work. The stabilizers will burn out in the process, though." Nolan took a deep breath. "Do it. Prepare to overload the stabilizers. Harris, ready the Dauntless for an emergency jump. We're not going down with this nebula." As the crew scrambled to execute the plan, the Gorthak ship's weapon reached full charge. A blinding beam of energy erupted toward the nebula. But just as it reached its target, the stabilizers overloaded. The resulting explosion was both catastrophic and controlled, sending a shockwave rippling through the nebula. The core's chaotic energy dissipated in an instant, leaving behind a calm, eerie silence. The Dauntless was flung clear of the blast zone, its systems barely holding together. On the bridge, Nolan and his crew watched as the once turbulent nebula now shimmered with a peaceful glow. The Gorthak ship, caught in the shockwave, limped away with heavy damage. Captain Vreck's voice returned, this time with a grudging tone of respect. "You've won this time, human. But know this, your defiance won't be forgotten." Nolan smirked. "Good. We wouldn't want it to be." As the transmission ended, the crew of the Dauntless erupted into cheers. Against all odds, they had triumphed once again, proving that when humanity took a stand, even the galaxy had to take notice. Humanity's indomitable spirit. The Dauntless floated in the now tranquil nebula, its hull battered but intact. Sparks flew from damaged panels, and the faint hum of life support systems filled the ship. Despite the chaos they had endured, the crew's spirits were high. They had achieved the impossible again. Captain Nolan stood on the bridge, looking at the serene view on the main screen. The nebula, once a violent maelstrom of energy, now shimmered gently, its calm a testament to the crew's efforts. "Status report," Nolan said, his voice steady but carrying a note of exhaustion. Harris glanced up from his console. "Hull integrity at 65%. Engines are operational but running hot. Shields are down, but life support is stable." Dr. Trent walked onto the bridge, grease smeared on her face and a triumphant look in her eyes. "The stabilizers are toast as expected, but the nebula's energy has been neutralized. It won't cause any more disturbances or attract any more Gorthak attention." Nolan nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "Good work, Dr. Trent. Good work, everyone." Sarah's voice came through the comms from the engineering bay. "Captain, we've patched up the critical systems. We can hold until we reach the nearest station, but I wouldn't push the engines too hard." "Understood," Nolan replied. "Harris, set a course for the nearest safe harbor. Let's get our people home." As the ship began its slow journey out of the nebula, the crew gathered in the common area. Exhaustion mingled with pride as they recounted the events of the past days. Laughter rang out as they shared stories of close calls and narrow escapes. Sarah joined them, dropping heavily into a chair. "You know," she said, grinning, "I think we just added another chapter to the Gorthak's handbook on why messing with humans is a bad idea." Dr. Trent chuckled. "They'll never admit it, but I'm sure Captain Vreck is rethinking his life choices right now." Harris raised a mug of synthetic coffee. "To humanity. Stubborn, resourceful, and just crazy enough to pull it off." The crew raised their mugs in unison, their laughter filling the room. Back on the bridge, Nolan sat alone, staring out at the stars. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers and wonders alike. But today, humanity had proven once again that their spirit could not be broken. The door to the bridge slid open, and Sarah stepped in. "Penny for your thoughts, Captain." Nolan smiled faintly, just thinking about what's next. The Gorthak won't forget this, and neither will the rest of the galaxy. Sarah leaned against the console. "Let them remember. Let them talk. Every time they try to underestimate us, we show them what we're made of. That's what makes us human." Nolan nodded. "That it does." The stars stretched out before them, infinite and inviting. The Dauntless might have been a small ship in a vast galaxy, but it carried within it something far greater: humanity's unyielding drive to survive, adapt, and thrive. And as long as that spark remained, no force in the universe could extinguish it.